It sounds bold and exciting to say you have no limits, but it's also profoundly stupid and deadly to others. It's the old satanic delusion of the wealth and privilege of the rulers of the peoples shall not be so amongst you, according to Jesus. Teach them to keep my commandments, he said. No limits is the deadly mythology of single-use life, where the dust is not allowed to give life as it returns to dust. Even with God everything is possible implies a relative limit. And in that conversation, Jesus was exposing the limits of the usual solutions: money, privilege, even doing the right thing. Brownie points which are good but limited without the transforming partnership. We fall down trying to understand Trinity, which we can't, rather than grasp and relate to Trinity, which we can certainly as children and indeed also as adults if we've been wise enough to hold on to the childlike and left behind the childish as we grew up. Mature Christians are childlike but also mature. That's why we need to treat robustly the zealotry of translators and interpreters, yes, and preachers, none with any intent to mislead. It's like when I ask congregations whether dove or snake is the model for discipleship, and they all go for the gentleness of the dove rather than the craftiness of the snake as well. When asked which says more of God, the limited or the limitless, if we're eagerly seeking the greater glory of God, we tend to go exclusively for option 2. Falling, therefore, into Satan's trap of exclusion. Choosing a cake we can then never eat. Slavishly obeying the scenario of question, rather than, as Jesus so frequently and subversively did, responding with question. Because option 2 necessarily includes option 1. We find God in our limits, in repurposing rather than throwing away and buying new. I am with you all the days until the end of this age. That gives accompaniment, closeness, sustaining, repurposing and limits, but it rather too easily slides into I'm with you always. No limit, no further ado. However you read it, in this great commission of the risen Christ, the continuing and defined partnership has the last word. It's true that whereas Mark's gospel presents that wholesome commission of good news to every creature, Matthew's at first glance appears to be more exclusive. At first glance only, because this commission aims at the baptismal enablement of the community of every nation, the making of disciples to bring that good news to all creation. Worship is not grovelling. It empowers and adds dignity to the worshipper, helping them grow to be good news for creation. The physical implication of baptism is immersion into the life and work of the all-sustaining Trinity. That's no rubber stamp. The spiritual implication of baptism is transformation of outlook, heart, mind, definitely behaviour, whatever. If you're making disciples, it's more than signing on a dotted line. It's building a community of activism, which will, of course, also include those who doubt, those who waver, those who are here just because they have other needs that need attended to, and they too are welcome. That they too are welcome is a discipline of our discipleship. We must not assume that people or creatures with no purpose we can see have no value to God. Discipleship is being enfolded in the family business of God, partnering with the Good Shepherd rather than casual employment as the hired hand who runs away when the wolf turns up. Partnership. That's what communities do, and communities of communities. And God, once creating, now far more sustaining and repurposing all creation, heaven and earth, soil and sky. Change hearts and minds, even your own, and like the butterfly's wing in that scientific fable, you have changed everything. All creation, earth and heaven, soil and sky. So what can we recycle this Trinity Sunday? How about the unduly low-key, comfortable role of stewardship, which has satisfied and yet stunted churches made timid by abusive readings of human dominion as selfish domination, exclusive of the governing authority of creation, to which our position makes us accountable. Whatever you call it, our place as humans is not pussyfooting. Nothing frees us to leave nature to her own devices, not anymore. We can't take any step without putting our foot in something. But we can choose what we put our foot in and how. Science clarifies our view, though the choice remains ours. So Christ's offer is made. The commission is given to keep, cherish and fulfill what Jesus has taught. Not like some ivory tower librarian, but as part of God's relationship with creation. What does he teach? Look at the birds. Learn from the trees. Read the signs. Love your neighbour and your neighbour as yourself. Sow generously that you may reap abundantly. Forgive, build community, trust God, the recycled and ever recycling God in relationship, because you can't do it on your own. What's distinctive about God as Trinity? Well, not just the rather widespread sacredness of the number 3, but the special, close and ongoing relationship. This year, this month, with racial tension flaring around the human world, we need to recognise that it is the species in all our diversity which is continually shaped and reshaped in the image and likeness of God. The community in the image of community. The wider you cast your net, the more intimate your relationship with God. Equality, relationship, freedom and love are holy. The focus of God we hear in both our readings today is geocentric, in the goodness of what is made and in provisions made in humanity for good management. What else is baptism? How else can the teachings of Christ be cherished and fulfilled? In Genesis, does God's inclusive blessing of humankind abolish the same blessing for all other creatures, or are our minds wide enough to accommodate both? And does God's appointment of humanity as overseer immediately abolish the authority of the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night? What do you think? The point of filling the earth, well, surely we reached that point long ago, when human activity began to disrupt the natural cycles, and maybe that's when responsibility should have kicked in. The time long past when limitless could still make sense, like the deluded ape King Louis in the Jungle Book, who reached the top and had to stop. That's what's bothering me, and so it should. There is a top, and we have to stop. The image of a dome, a closed and dynamic sky-stroke heaven, is, in that sense, far more experientially fruitful for life on earth than a wide-open, soulless space. For us, as for the visionary writers of Genesis, the best mental model is once more the closed system, the bottle garden of sea, sky and soil, where nothing at all exists other than in relation to others. Our earth, where oxygen, carbon, water and maybe life are only ever recycled and repurposed. Where the word of God is not only like, but perhaps accompanies the rain that falls from the sky, does its stuff and returns not empty, but having been received, lived and given. For whatever happens, good or bad, the close relationship remains. The sin of waste is just the temporary relocation of a problem which will come back to haunt you. There is no bottomless dumping ground. We cannot walk away from situations which waste the earth or lay it waste and go and find a clean green patch to be holy in. Not on earth. For here's where we live. Here's where we die. From here we pass to God's closer care. That's why a reconciled consciousness of death and of endings is something the Church has been honoured to be custodian of. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you will return is not a rebuke from God, it is kindly offered practical guidance for life. Life only happens within limits, only God has the key to anything beyond. Whatever else heaven might be, we grasp it first and best through our relationship with what we do see, as we make disciples and as we begin with ourselves in the midst of God.